Damn it.
Hey guys, how's it going? Welcome to another D20 Sundays. I decided to do a bit of a Q&A this time. I'll add a link down in the description to the Reddit post that I made about me being a dungeon master, and, people can ask me questions about Dungeons and Dragons and related things. So there was a number of replies, not only in that, but on a Facebook post, and I think one or two on Twitter, which once again is down in the description of where you can reach me at. And essentially, I open the floor for questions in the sense that, as a dungeon master and as a player, and my 8 years of experience, ask me any questions that you have, as I'm familiar with a lot of systems, from dating back to his original Dungeons and Dragons in 1st edition, all the way up to the current 5th edition. So, I've got my phone here, I've got all the questions loaded up, so here we go. So the first one is asking about balance and homebrew items. Homebrew items is a load of fun, but can easily be turned against the dungeon master if and or when the players find loopholes or the combat effectiveness is underestimated during the design. Which I did reply to all of these, or as best as I could. Very true. Which is why I normally find a group of fellow dungeon masters to essentially double check my work. There is a homebrew class in the Suriska campaign. It hasn't showed up yet because none of the players decided to choose it. I do know for a fact that 2 of the players was aware. I'm not sure if the other 3 were. Essentially, it is the Hell Knight class. They are the servants of the god of hell, Eryx. Their essentially purpose for being on the mortal plane is they are charged to find and destroy any demons, devils, and fiends and any demonic influence that is on the mortal plane and return it to hell. This means killing not only the demons, devils, and fiends, but also any conspirators that they have with them, such as mortals who decided to summon them without really the god of hell's permission. So yeah, fun times. It has been balanced, thankfully, because as I said, I ran it through a number of different dungeon masters to try and make sure that it's not overpowered, and especially with all of its different abilities. Next question is, what is the least confusing way I can introduce a player to spellcasting in Pathfinder? My girlfriend is going to be a player in my most recent campaign, and she wants to learn spellcasting, but is number dyslexic and feels like she'll get lost. This is actually a very cool thing. I actually have sometimes problems with my own form of dyslexia. Oddly enough, I cannot read music sheets. When you make a musical note, you draw it out, I can see it. But if you put it on the line paper, for some reason half of it disappears. No idea why. But when it comes to someone who is number dyslexic or has a hard time remembering the spells or so on, I found that having note cards and having them written out what they need to cast the spell, what it does and so on, and any of the math that they need for it is greatly wonderful. I've actually had to dungeon master for a player that was very similar to this, and having those note cards with the math and everything on there and making sure that they double check what they read on the note card helps greatly in this kind of situation. A common DM home game mistake is over awarding magic, wealth, experience, and etc. My current group of players came into such a large sum of cash and have had nothing but issues. Troubles with magic, smuggling it somewhere for safekeeping, dealing with taxes, and now the theft of a large portion of it. The magical items they have are fairly well rounded for a level 7 to 8 party. They each have a powerful magic item, but currently think of it only as a +1 piece of armor or weapon, as they never looked into the storage of the items. So, over-awarding magical items or loot or so on is actually known as a Monty Hall Dungeon Master. Now, just so you know, I'm not calling anyone a Monty Hall Dungeon Master. I'm not calling this guy a Monty Hall Dungeon Master. I'm saying that it is a very common mistake, especially with beginner Dungeon Masters. Essentially, you oopsed and you miscalculated the amount of money or magical items they're supposed to have at their level. Now, I'm not saying kill them off and start a new campaign, but I am saying is have hurdles come to where they have to use or expend the money to where it dries up a lot quicker than they expected. Taxes is one thing, theft is another, or maybe they have to make an investment. Maybe a con artist, tricks them into spending a large sum of money. I've done that before. These are other things that are pretty much... These are essentially DM tricks to try and balance out mistakes. And they're not underhanded. Well, they're a little underhanded, but here's the thing. You don't want to do them too much and too often, because then it makes your players kind of jaded. But at the same time, you don't want to make it unfair for your players. There was another part, essentially about, the +1 piece of armor or +1 piece of weapon, as they never looked into the stories of the items. I essentially had it to where there was a problem with this in one of my campaigns in the past. The solution I found is that make the history of the item important to either the campaign or a side-along of the campaign. Like, it ties in with the campaign, but it's not a major overarching thing, but the players would still be interested in looking into. Perhaps that +1 weapon once belonged to a dragon slayer, and now the age-old spirit of the dragon wants revenge on whoever wields it. Or maybe that shield, deflects away the spells of magic users, and it was used to defeat a wizard who's now, come back as a lich seeking revenge against anyone who wields the shield. I don't know. Something like that, though. Make it tie into your campaign, and it'll make it more, I guess, in-depth to your players, as well as giving them more interest into the item and perhaps even unlocking the item's full potential. The next one, maybe you can help me with these D4 times. Oh, I remember this. I answered this already. It was in dealing with the all flesh must be eaten game. And it took me a moment to figure it out, but it was essentially the math, the mechanics and everything behind it was poorly written. And it was bad. But we figured it out. We saved it. So I'm working on this scenario, Hunter, the Reckoning, and they will be battling the Wyrm in this chronicle, ancient god of natural death, gone crazy from imprisonment and becoming the god of decay and destruction. I'd like to present them to the aspect of how debilitating it can be when tainted by it. I got a couple of ideas, but I'm scared of giving too much information to my players. It's a horror setting, so I need them to be on their toes. If I tell them too much, I fear they will lose interest and no longer be scared by the supernatural as much. But I'd also like to give them enough for them not to be bored of the story arc. How should I proceed for a good pace of the game? This actually sounds pretty interesting to me. I would honestly say that when it comes down to it, if you have a god or a demigod or something that you want them to essentially chase after and defeat for not only their own personal reasons but also because of interests, have one or two of the players become inflicted with a curse or a disease caused by this god of decay. Maybe they lose 1 maximum hit point every few days and they have a long trek. You don't want them too debilitated to where the point where they finally get to the boss, they're just like one hit and dead. But at the same time, you want them to kind of start panicking a little bit, fearful of this decaying curse that has taken hold of themselves or their friends. And you could describe it in like different ways, maybe like pale blotches on the skin, or perhaps they got it from treating a symptom of this god of decay's presence, or a scale or a shard that fell from it. And, this land has become blighted, and when they destroy the shard and free the land of blight, as a curse for doing so, the player that struck the final blow to the shard is cursed with the same kind of blight. Let's see. Trying to focus on prestige classes, or things that are some way different to traditional D&D, such as a gunslinger or a swashbuckler, or characters like a pirate. How would you build a pirate in D&D? Try to convert these concepts into D&D if possible. This is not overly really a question, but more of how he suggests, building upon the whole being a dungeon master and homebrewing things. I told him that, in my opinion, honestly, a pirate is not much different from a swashbuckler. I would probably add like a little thing to where they have like a weakened version of the gunslinger's grit, so that way they could use like flintlock pistols and stuff. But for the most part, they're a swashbuckler. See, that was all on the Facebook page. Let's go to Twitter. Honestly, I never understood what proficiency with weapons or armor entailed. Whew. So, that is an important thing when it comes to dungeon mastering and also being a player. If you're proficient with a weapon, you add your proficiency modifier to hit. That's just it. Pretty much, if your proficiency modifier is +2, you are proficient with a longsword, and you've got a +1 strength, well, then it's going to be a +3 to hit with that longsword. If you're not proficient with that longsword, it's only going to be a +1 to hit. Now, when it comes to armor, if you're not proficient with the armor, well, you can't cast spells if you're a spellcaster. You get disadvantage on all ability checks, skill checks, and attack rolls, and saving throws that are dealing with strength and dexterity, which can suck if you are really needing those things. Let's see, and finally the Reddit. Alright, so how much money do you make from your channel? None. I make no money. This channel's too small. I have no real plans of monetizing this channel, and that's pretty much it. If you ever notice every now and then, there's actually a donation link on Streamlabs in the description. Once in a while I throw it up there, and I don't really draw attention to it, because I don't know why. What edition do you mainly focus on? How many players in your current group? You mentioned part-time Dungeon Master. Does this mean there are other Dungeon Masters that take over when you are not around? If so, how do you coordinate efforts? How often is your meetup? Wow. Dude, you have a lot of questions. I did answer them. So, what edition do I mainly focus on? At the moment, I mainly focus on 5th edition. It's kind of what everyone's playing these days, but I am proficient. Well, I wouldn't say proficient. I am familiar with all the way back to the older editions, except for 4th edition. I kind of skipped over that, thank God. You mentioned part-time DM. Does this mean there are other Dungeon Masters that take over when you're not around? Yes and no. The name part-time Dungeon Master actually comes from the fact that I have a full-time job, and I'm only a Dungeon Master in my off time. And it kind of stuck. It actually came from a long time ago when I Dungeon Mastered for a charity. It was like Kids for Cancer or something. I essentially taught children who were in this one hospital in Atlanta. God, it was depressing. I don't mean it bad. It's just more of, I know if I went back there now, those kids probably aren't there, and I don't like thinking about it. That's the reason why I haven't gone back. But I essentially taught the kids how to play Dungeons and Dragons. And I ran a small campaign for them of like 2 or 3 sessions for charity. And I ended up raising like $200 that I just donated straight to the charity. But essentially it became a joke that I was only a part-time Dungeon Master, as I wasn't doing it full-time. I wasn't like, hey, can I hire you to be my Dungeon Master? I never did that. So I was just a part-time Dungeon Master. How many players in my current group? 5 in my group, but there is another group that I am in that is essentially 5 to 7 sometimes, but most of the time as of late it's only been like 3 because real life sucks. Are there other Dungeon Masters that take over when you're not around? Yes. KG, or Kelker, his name is Kelker. I call him KG a lot because we come from the Dark Jedi Brotherhood together. Star Wars fan club. KG is Regnus Willow in my campaign, in the Sariska campaign. He is the Dungeon Master for the second group that I'm in, where I play Ignis Fimond, the cleric who's very nervous and accidentally shoots off his crossbow because it's got a hair trigger. So he kind of just Dungeon Masters for me, so that way I can kind of recharge my batteries, and that way I'm not always stuck as the Dungeon Master. There was also a time where I would Dungeon Master a arc of the campaign, like a story arc, and then the next arc would be the next Dungeon Master, who was one of the players, and he would write that arc, and he would Dungeon Master that arc. And we would essentially go around and do this until either A, everyone had a chance to be a Dungeon Master and the story was complete, or B, I felt recharged enough to where I could take back over for the next arc and, continue on the story. it's very easy to coordinate, schedule wise, and also you just pretty much have to say, hey, in this many sessions I'm going to be taking a break. Who would like to take over? And sort of work with them roughly as to how the rest of how the next arc should run. How often is our meetups? At the moment, every weekend, every Sunday. Okay, here's a little secret. I record the D20 Sundays on either Friday nights or Saturdays, and then upload them overnight to where they're up for Sunday. Then on Sunday, I have the Suriska campaign, where I record that, and then I upload that overnight to where it will take a while normally a day and a half for it to upload because it's so freaking big and my internet's such crap. And then that'll be up as soon as it's ready. The last one with KG being the Dungeon Master, or Regnus Willow being the Dungeon Master, I don't record that one. That's purely for him, and that's purely for fun. What is my favorite type of cheese? I remember this guy, George Broughton, on Reddit. He is kind of trolly. He does this for every AMA. What is my favorite type of cheese, though? Smoked Gouda. I like smoked Gouda. It is very delicious cheese. It is really good when you just add shreds of it on top of a pizza. Any tips for up-and-coming Dungeon Masters? Also, how to keep combat entertaining and not so number crunchy. Here is the link to D20 Sundays. And in there is also making combat engaging. I gave him the link directly to that one. But also, the whole D20 series is about tips for Dungeon Masters, especially up-and-coming ones, in order to make their games more fleshed out and make them more entertaining and fun. See, this Sunday will be my first time playing. Do you have any tips for me? Don't be that guy. Be respectful of your other players and your Dungeon Master. Remember, the Dungeon Master has the golden, final say. Read up as to what your role is in the group. If you're the rogue or the ranger, restate that. If you're the ranger or the spellcaster, do not be in upfront combat. That is not where you belong. You belong in the back, shooting away spells or arrows or whatever. If you are the fighter, up in front, meat shield. That is what you are. Know your role. Sure, there's different ways of building every class, but for the most part, that is kind of it. And most of all, make sure you know what you are doing. Essentially, read up on your class, read up on what type of adventure your Dungeon Master is running, and make sure that it's the right fit for you. And if there's role-playing in your group, be sure to declare what is in character and what is out of character. Your character may feel differently about something than you as a person does, and it's very important that you differentiate between that. Can I get an idiot's answer of how AC works? I'm still not 100% sure I have it down yet. What dice do you use to attack? How many mods come into play? What proficiencies can factor in either attacking or defending? The whole shebang. Okay, so this is not an idiot's question. This is a standard question that any up-and-comer player or Dungeon Master should know. And they should definitely ask it if they don't understand it. When it comes to attacking, you roll a d20, and essentially you add your proficiency bonus if you are proficient with the weapon, and any related mods. If it's a bow, you add your dexterity modifier, or a finesse weapon, you add a dexterity modifier, such as a rapier. But if it's a short sword, long sword, or a mace, then you add your strength modifier. That is to hit. And then you add the, corresponding modifier to the damage. You want to meet or exceed their AC with the dice plus the to hit bonus in order to deal damage. If you go beneath the AC, then it's essentially either they moved out of the way or the strike did not hit them hard enough to actually damage them. Perhaps their armor took the blow and not them. As far as what proficiencies or what bonuses go into AC, everyone starts with a base AC of 10. Then it's plus your dexterity modifier, plus your armor. So if your armor gives you +2 and you have a dexterity modifier of 2, then your AC is 14. And if someone, say a goblin, attacks you with a dagger and it's got a +3 to hit, then it needs to roll an 11 on that dice in order to hit you with that dagger. If it rolls an 11 plus the 3 from its to hit modifier, then it's going to hit you because it has a 2 hit of 14. And then, damage and so on. So once again, when it comes to armor class, the higher the better. Essentially, you're making it to where you are, whenever something fails to hit your modifier, like I said, it's assumed that either you dodged it or it didn't land a solid hit on you. It more of like scratched across your armor but didn't actually hit your armor hard enough to actually do damage to you. There's a lot of simplistic math behind it, but for the most part, it's just takes a little bit of reading. It's not that hard, and honestly, it's a very good thing to ask, because if you're not sure, it's better to ask and then find out versus not knowing and causing a bit of a hold-up trying to figure it out. But pretty much, if you were attacking something, then add your strength modifier with a melee weapon. Unless it's a finesse weapon, then add your dex modifier. If you're proficient with the weapon, add your proficiency. And you're trying to meet or exceed their AC. Do note that if you have a negative in one of your modifiers, that does also affect your damage, such as if you have a -1 to strength and you roll to hit, instead of being a +3, if you were a +1 to hit with a longsword, it would be at +2 to hit. And if you hit, then it would be a 1d8 -1. That's just pretty much how it goes. It's basic math. Don't worry. You got this. Anyways, that was the AMA that I held for essentially my small little D&D channel here. More introductions to D20 Sundays. And I'm going to be redoing, eventually, I'll be doing a more, not really redoing, but a more in-depth video about beginner tips for dungeon masters. This is your first time dungeon mastering. What do you do? And yeah, so fun times. Thank you for watching. Once again, subscribe, like, comment. If maybe you have some of your own questions for myself as a dungeon master, or maybe about the Suriskin campaign or other things, I'll certainly gladly help and answer as best as I can. Anyways, catch you later.